Hi, Zach. Thank you for helping
Hey,
me with
Richard.
this.
Of course. Sorry, I didn't realize. I should have done it earlier. No problem.
It's all right, but
So
you set it
you,
up as a recurring meeting, right? So we'll
yeah,
never
yeah,
have to change this invitation. Perfect.
and then you updated the Roberts groups.
Uh, yeah, I updated all of Robert's groups.
Excellent. All right. So let me just stream this. 1 second. Give me 1 second. Do you want anybody helping you?
No, I should be okay. As is typical, we'll start on the sevens. So give people a little bit of time to come in. For those of you who don't know me, I hope you'll find this fun and exciting. For those of you who do, welcome back. Uh, I'm so happy that you got to spend time with me in my Middle Eastern history series. Hopefully, this pivot will be fun. It's something that, I feel like I have a better grasp on the Middle East than I do on East Asia, but hopefully, I have enough of a grasp to really bring some of that to life for you. I think East Asia is a phenomenally interesting region, and if you guys want to put in the chat something that attracted you. To coming to this meeting, something that made you interested in East Asia and East Asian history, uh, would love to talk about it. And one thing I want to say off the bat, and I will mention it in the presentation, this presentation and this series are in no way a replacement for or repetition of what Jason Peng is doing in his Asian philosophy series. In fact, I heartily recommend that series if you want to get in depth, especially when we talk about the religions of East Asia. The religions slash philosophies of East Asia are incredibly detailed, complex, and subject to numerous different philosophical deviations and revisions that I'm going to sort of compress into one idea. It's the same way that, for example, we learn math in math class as one set of uh, geometric equations, then trigonomic equations, and pre-calculus and calculus as if it was one preordained setup, but actually was a history of people reflecting and reviewing the math of previous generations and trying to expand upon it. In the same way, Chinese philosophy and religion operates. So I highly recommend going to his class if you really want to dig deep into these philosophies. I'm going to present them much more in a organized, looking at it from the present perspective than this sort of holistic building piece by piece. Although we will definitely talk about some of the history of the development of religion. Hi, Lisa. Welcome. Yes, fantastic that you worked in Vietnam. What a wonderful country. I enjoyed it there myself. There's another comment here saying that, a lot of history was European focused, and the discussion of East Asia would really fill the knowledge gap. And I hope that serves to do it. We will get to the modern period eventually, and I personally love the modern period when Asia opens up to the West, or rather, we can say is forcibly open to the West. But definitely a significant part of our discussion, and certainly the discussion for today, will focus on East Asia long before the West is involved, and when the East Asian sphere is operating under its own set of paradigms and ideas. Um, just
So
reminding
Richard,
people, yeah, go ahead.
um, just to let people know, also, you lived in South Korea for a bit, right?
Yeah, I worked
And
in South Korea for a few months. My wife is Chinese. Uh, so this part of the world is very central to me. So um, it's yeah, and I see some people have been South Korea and Japan. Um, no, it's really an incredible region, and I feel like there is a lot of discussion about what China is in the last, let's say, 40 years, and there's certainly something interesting to say about that, or what Japan was during World War II. And of course, there's something interesting to say about that. I have hopefully we'll get to World War II, which is a massive conflict in the East Asian world. Aside from its effect in Europe and North Africa, and the Middle East, of course, which we discussed on my Middle Eastern series. But in East Asia, there's going to be a huge discussion about it. But I think that aside from those specific events, people really don't talk about what East Asia is and why it is in the position that it is. So hopefully this series will help to illuminate that.
Just to set a
Uh,
tone for our discussion, Richard, how did Japan was able to defeat Russia before the World War I and made such a leap in industrialism, or did they? Did
sure. That's, I mean, it's very much outside of the scope of what we're going to talk about tonight, just to tell everybody. But in terms of, and we're going to talk about the normal presentation in about 3 minutes. But if I'm going to make a long story short, it's a few different things. One, the Trans-Siberian Railroad hadn't been completed, so Russia couldn't shift its military from the west, where it was dominant, right on the borders with Europe, to the east, where it would need to fight Japan. So once the Japanese Navy was able to effectively destroy the first round of the Russian Navy that was protecting the Korean Peninsula and Vladivostok, the Russians were in a very precarious position, and it took them a significant amount of time to recover by sending the fleet all the way from St. Petersburg, all the way around Africa, to get to Japan. That's number one. Number two, the Japanese had already landed and disembarked on the Japanese peninsula before this war. If we remember, the Japanese had already landed in the Sino-Japanese War of 1895, which was 10 years before the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905. So the Japanese were already installed and had military barracks on land, so they didn't have to worry about crossing into Korea. They could actually fight the Russian troops on land and exhaust Russian on land supplies as well. Um, and the Japanese had German and American support in their historical development from the 1860s into 1900, and that was riding on their side. And finally, they had significantly more funding than the Russians expected them to have because most European banks turned down the Japanese, believing that how could an East Asian people defeat a European people? But the Japanese were actually able to sell significant percentages of their shares on Wall Street, where individual American investors and bankers um, put their weight behind the Japanese authorities. And of course, when we finally get up to the Russo-Japanese War, we'll have probably about an hour discussion about that war and why it happened the way it happened. So this abridged version in no way serves to cover all of that uh, complexity. But we are here on the 7th, so I'm going to begin.